Car companies dream up wild machines you are never meant to see, but we found them. These are not just cars, they are rolling secrets. From a nuclear-powered Ford to a car with 3 wheels that was designed to fail. What you are about to see proves that the weirdest ideas in history almost made it to your driveway. 1. The Cadillac Cyclone. Let's start with a car that looks like it flew right out of a comic book. In the 1950s, car companies were obsessed with the space race and jet airplanes. They wanted their cars to look like futuristic rockets, and nobody did it better or weirder than Cadillac. In 1959, they built a prototype called the Cadillac Cyclone. This thing was a rolling piece of science fiction. It had 2 giant black cones on the front that looked like jet engines or maybe even torpedoes. But here is the wild part. Those cones were not just for looks. They were actually part of a military-grade radar system. The car had a crash avoidance system that would scan the road ahead. If it detected something in the car's path, it would set off a warning light and a loud sound to alert the driver. This was way back in 1959. Your modern car might have this technology now, but the Cyclone had it over 60 years ago. The doors did not open sideways either. They slid back electronically, like a van door today. And the roof, a giant bubble of clear plastic, would automatically lift up when you open the door. It was pure futuristic fantasy. The thing is, the technology was way too expensive and probably not reliable enough for the real world. Only one was ever made, and it sits in a museum today. A beautiful but bizarre reminder of a time when cars were designed to look like they belonged on another planet. The Cyclone was a wild attempt to put jet fighter tech in a car, but another company took that idea and pushed it to an even more extreme and dangerous level. 2. The GM Firebird I. If the Cadillac Cyclone looked like a jet, the General Motors Firebird one was a jet. Seriously, this was not a car with jet-style fins. This was a car with an actual jet engine. Back in 1953, the head designer at GM, a guy named Harley Earl, wanted to see if a gas turbine engine, the same kind of engine that powered fighter jets, could be used in a car. The result was one of the most insane prototypes ever created. The Firebird one looked like a fighter plane without wings. It had a long, pointed nose, a single-seat cockpit with a bubble canopy, and a huge tail fin at the back. It was built out of fiberglass to be super lightweight, and in the back, it had a real Whirlfire turbo power engine that ran on kerosene. This engine spun at over 26,000 rotations per minute and shot out exhaust gas at a temperature of 1,250 degrees Fahrenheit. It was so powerful and so dangerous that the engineers were genuinely afraid to drive it. Truth be told, it was not very practical. Jet engines are very inefficient at low speeds, so it used a ton of fuel just to drive around a parking lot. It was also incredibly loud, like a real jet taking off. The team tested it and it worked, but they knew right away this was not the future of family cars. It was a pure experiment to push the limits of what was possible. A car with a real jet engine is almost unbelievable. But what about the car that started this whole trend of crazy prototypes in the first place? The one that is considered the world's very first concept car. 3. The Buick Y-Job. Before 1938, car companies did not really make concept cars. They just built their new models and sold them. But that same designer from GM, Harley Earl, had a revolutionary idea. He wanted to build a car just to show off new technology and styling ideas, a car that was never meant to be sold. He called it his Y-Job, and it became the grandfather of all the weird prototypes that followed. At first glance, the Y-Job might just look like a cool old car, but you have to remember what other cars looked like back then. Most cars in the 1930s were tall and boxy, with huge separate fenders and running boards on the side. The Y-Job was different. It was long, low, and sleek. It had headlights that disappeared into the fenders, a feature that would not become common for decades. It had power windows, which was like science fiction at the time. The convertible top was electric and would hide away completely under a metal panel, something that is still a luxury feature today. Harley Earl actually used the Y-Job as his personal car for years, driving it around Detroit to see how people would react to his futuristic ideas. The car was a huge hit at auto shows, and it influenced car design for the next 20 years. Many of the features that seemed so wild on the Y-Job, like its wraparound bumpers and flush door handles, slowly made their way into the cars that everyone drove. The Y-Job was a rolling testbed for future ideas, but the same team at GM would later create another prototype that looked even more like a spaceship and was packed with even more unbelievable gadgets. 4. The General Motors LeSabre. After the Second World War, the jet age obsession came back stronger than ever. In 1951, General Motors revealed a car that looked like it was half jet fighter and half alien spacecraft. It was called the LeSabre, and it was the successor to the Y-Job. It was another one of Harley Earl's personal design projects, and it was packed with technology that was decades ahead of its time. The look of the LeSabre was shocking. It had a massive jet intake-style oval grille at the front. The back had huge tail fins inspired by the latest fighter planes, with a rocket nozzle-like tail light in the center. The windshield wrapped around the cockpit like an airplane. But the most incredible part was the technology. The car had a supercharged V8 engine that could run on both gasoline and methanol, just like a race car. It had a built-in hydraulic jack system. If you got a flat tire, you could push a button in the cockpit, and jacks would lift the car up for you. One of the most shocking aspects was its rain sensor. In the center of the console, there was a small sensor that could detect moisture. If it started to rain while the convertible top was down, the car would automatically raise the roof for you. This is a feature that some luxury cars still do not have today, yet the LeSabre had it in 1951. It was a true marvel of engineering. A car with its own hydraulic jacks is wild, but our next car looks like it was designed for a supervillain, a massive, imposing machine that cost a fortune and disappeared for decades. 5. The Phantom Corsair. Imagine a car from the future designed in the 1930s. That is the Phantom Corsair. This car is one of the most visually stunning and mysterious prototypes ever built. It was the dream of a man named Rust Heinz, who was part of the famous Heinz ketchup family. He wanted to build the most advanced and futuristic car the world had ever seen, and in 1938, he did it. The Phantom Corsair looks like nothing else on the road. It was incredibly low and wide, with no running boards, no door handles, and fully enclosed wheels. The body was a single smooth shape that looked like it was sculpted from liquid metal. To get in, you had to push hidden buttons, and the doors would pop open electronically. It was a huge car, capable of carrying 6 people. 4 people sat in the front row, with the driver in the middle, and 2 more sat in the back. The dashboard was full of futuristic gauges and even had a compass and an altimeter, which measures height. The car was built on the chassis of the most expensive car of the time, Accord 810, and the bodywork alone cost a fortune, something like $185,000 in today's money. Rust Heinz planned to put the car into limited production and sell it for a price that would be equal to $200,000 today. Sadly, just a few months after the car was completed, Rust Heinz was in a terrible accident and passed away. His dream of a futuristic car company was gone, and only one Phantom Corsair was ever built. That car was a futuristic luxury liner, but our next prototype was built for pure function, and it accidentally became the world's very first minivan, decades before anyone else thought of it. 6. The Stout Scarab. Long before the Chrysler minivan changed family transportation forever, another designer had the same idea, but his version was much, much weirder. His name was William Stout, a brilliant engineer who had designed airplanes. In the 1930s, he decided to design a car. He thought regular cars were stupid. He hated the long hoods and separate trunks. He wanted to design a car from the inside out, a drawing room on wheels. The result was the Stout Scarab. The Scarab looked like a giant metal beetle, which is how it got its name. It did not have a long hood because the engine was in the back. This meant the entire inside of the car was open space for passengers. The driver sat way up front, and behind him was a huge cabin. The passenger seats were not bolted to the floor in a row. Instead, there was a couch in the back and movable chairs that you could arrange any way you wanted. You could even set up a card table in the middle. It was literally a living room on wheels. The body was made of lightweight aluminum, just like an airplane, and it had a smooth, streamlined shape that was very futuristic for the time. The doors were huge for easy entry. Nobody can believe when it happened, but this was the first minivan created in 1936. The problem was the cost. Because they were hand-built, each Scarab cost a fortune, more than the most expensive Cadillac. He only built about 9 of them, and the idea of a family van was forgotten for another 50 years. The Scarab was a teardrop-shaped van, but our next car was also a teardrop designed by another genius inventor, and it turned out to be famously and dangerously unstable. 7. The Dymaxion car. Buckminster Fuller was a famous inventor and architect known for creating the geodesic dome. He was a man who wanted to reinvent everything, including the automobile. In 1933, he revealed his creation, the Dymaxion car. It was one of the strangest and most ambitious car designs ever. Fuller wanted his car to be able to taxi on the ground like an airplane, and one day he hoped it would even be able to fly. The Dymaxion was a giant teardrop on wheels. It was over 20 feet long and could carry 11 people. It had 3 wheels, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. The real weird part was the steering. The single rear wheel was what you used to steer the car. This meant the back of the car would swing around in a huge arc when you turned. It could basically turn around in its own length, which was amazing for parking. However, at high speeds, this design was incredibly dangerous. The car would become very unstable, especially in crosswinds. You see, the teardrop shape combined with the rear wheel steering would cause the back of the car to lift off the ground, making it almost impossible to control. One of the 3 prototypes was involved in a serious crash at the 1933 Chicago World's Fair, which gave the car a bad reputation. Despite its brilliant use of space and amazing fuel economy for its time, the Dymaxion was just too weird and too dangerous for the public. The dream of a flying car would have to wait. A 3-wheeled car is already odd, but our next prototype was also a 3-wheeler built right after the war, and it led to one of the most spectacular failures in automotive history. 8. The Davis Divan. After World War II, a lot of people were trying to build new and exciting cars. One of the most famous and controversial was a man named Glenn Gordon Gary Davis. He had a vision for a futuristic 3-wheeled car that he claimed was safer and more efficient than anything else on the road. He called it the Davis Divan. The divan looked like a giant cartoonish bathtub on wheels. It had a big, round, streamlined body made of aluminum. It had 1 wheel in the front and 2 in the back. It could seat 4 people across in a single bench seat. Davis was an incredible salesman, and he traveled the country promoting his amazing new car. He claimed it could do 100 miles per hour and get 50 miles per gallon. He set up a huge factory in an old airplane hangar and started taking orders from people who wanted to become dealers. The problem was, he was not very good at actually building the cars. The company struggled to get production going. Only about 13 divans were ever actually built. All the money he had raised from his dealers was gone. Eventually, the workers and the dealers sued him. Gary Davis was found guilty of fraud and sent to prison. The whole company collapsed, and the dream of the 3-wheeled divan was over. Some weird cars came from big dreamers, but our next car came from a major company, a French one, and it was a bold experiment in making a car as slippery as a fish. 9. The Peugeot 402 Andro. In the 1930s, car designers became obsessed with the new science of aerodynamics. That is the study of how air flows over an object. They realized that if you made a car with a smoother, more rounded shape, it would slip through the air more easily, making it faster and more fuel efficient. A French engineer named Jean Andrew was a master of this science, and in 1936, the car company Peugeot, which is spelled Peugeot, hired him to create a super streamlined version of their 402 model. The result was a car that looked like it had been melted. The standard Peugeot 402 was already a pretty sleek car for its time, but Andro's version took it to another level. He created a perfectly smooth, teardrop-shaped body. The wheels were covered with fender skirts to make the sides flat. The back of the car sloped down in a long, graceful curve, ending in a massive vertical fin. Like the tail of an airplane, this fin was supposed to make the car more stable at high speeds. The car was tested in a wind tunnel, and the results were amazing. The Enduro version had much less wind resistance than the regular car. This meant it could go faster and use less gas. Even though it had the exact same engine, Peugeot built a few of these special models, and they looked like something from a science fiction movie driving down the streets of Paris. The ideas were brilliant, but the look was maybe too radical for the time. That French car used a fin to control the air, but another French company created a car so strange and luxurious, its most bizarre feature was actually on the inside. 10. The Voisin C25 Aerodyne. Gabriel Voisin was one of the most interesting and eccentric car builders in history. He started out building airplanes, and he brought that airplane-style engineering to his cars. His cars were known for being incredibly luxurious, expensive, and just plain weird. His masterpiece was the 1934 C25 Aerodyne. From the outside, the Aerodyne was a work of art. It had a stunning, streamlined Art Deco body with swooping lines and a massive, powerful-looking front grille. The wheels were covered, and the lines were all designed to make the car look like it was moving, even when it was standing still. But the truly mind-blowing feature was the roof. Most cars at the time had a roof made of fabric that you had to manually fold down. The Aerodyne had a sliding metal roof that was powered by a vacuum motor. With the push of a lever, the roof would slowly and silently slide back into the trunk area, disappearing completely. What people do not notice is that this was one of the first ever retractable hardtop cars, an idea that would not become popular until almost 60 years later. The inside was just as amazing, with fabric patterns and designs that looked like they belonged in a Parisian palace. Voisin only built a handful of these amazing machines, and they are now considered some of the most beautiful and valuable cars in the world. Some cars are beautiful because of their details, but our next car is beautiful because it has almost no details at all. It is one of the most stunning, flowing shapes ever put on wheels. 11. The Norman Timms Special. Some car prototypes are built by massive corporations with unlimited budgets. Others are built by a single person with a dream and an incredible amount of talent. The Norman Timms Special is one of those. Norman Timms was an engineer who had worked on race cars. In the late 1940s, he spent over 2 years in his garage by himself, creating his ultimate dream car. The car he built is breathtaking. It has no doors, no roof, and no chrome trim. It is just one single, impossibly long and smooth shape. The body is a collection of flowing curves that make the car look like a drop of liquid mercury. The front is incredibly long, and the cockpit is pushed way to the back, almost over the rear wheels. The entire rear section of the car's body was a single piece that would lift up hydraulically to reveal the engine and the chassis. The thing is, Timms did not have a fancy factory. He built the car's chassis by hand out of steel tubes. He then created the shape of the body using wood, and then he hand-hammered sheets of aluminum over that wooden buck to create the final seamless form. It was an incredible feat of craftsmanship. The car was a true one-of-a-kind creation. It appeared in magazines and was a star of the California car show scene before disappearing for almost 50 years. That car was a masterpiece of American garage engineering, but at the same time, Italian designers were also obsessed with streamlined shapes, and they created a prototype that looked more like a jet than a car. 12. The Ghia Gilda Streamline X. In the 1950s, the Italian design house named Ghia was famous for creating some of the most beautiful car bodies in the world. They were hired by car companies from all over, especially from America, to design stylish and exciting cars. In 1955, they were asked by the American company Chrysler to build a car that explored the future of aerodynamics. The result was a show car they called the Gilda, and it looked like a spaceship. The Gilda was an extreme design. It was long, low, and incredibly narrow. The body was a perfect smooth torpedo shape, with no radiator grille and no bumpers. The most dramatic feature was the huge fins at the back. Instead of looking like the fins on other 1950s cars, these were tall and thin, like the tail of a jet fighter. The whole car looked like it was designed to break the sound barrier. One of the most shocking things is that the car was actually designed to be powered by a gas turbine jet engine. However, the engine was not ready in time for the car show, so they just pushed the car out onto the stage with a regular small engine. But the dream was there. This was supposed to be a real-life jet car. The Gilda was a huge hit, and it heavily influenced the design of many Chrysler cars in the late 1950s, which became famous for their giant tail fins. The Gilda looked like a jet, but another Italian design house took the idea of extreme styling even further, creating a series of cars that looked like they were designed for Batman. 13. The Alfa Romeo BAT concepts. Between 1953 and 1955, the Italian car company Alfa Romeo and the design house Bertone teamed up to create a series of 3 of the most incredible prototypes ever seen. They were called the BAT cars, which stood for Berlinetta Aerodinamica Tecnica. That is a fancy way of saying they were technical aerodynamic coupes. Their goal was to create cars with the lowest possible wind resistance. The 3 cars, called the BAT 5, 7, and 9, looked like alien spacecraft. The BAT 5 was the first, a smooth coupe with curved, inward-wrapping tail fins. It was a wild design that sliced through the air with incredible efficiency. Then came the BAT 7, which was even more extreme. The fins were much larger and more dramatically curved, almost meeting in the middle of the car. It looked like a giant, futuristic bat. It was so aerodynamic that it had a drag coefficient of 0.19, a number that is still incredible even by today's standards. Most modern cars are around 0.25. The final car, the BAT 9, was designed to look a little more like a regular production car, with a more normal grille and headlights, but it still kept the wild, curved tail fins. For decades, the 3 cars were separated and owned by different collectors, but eventually they were brought back together, a family of the most beautiful and bizarre concept cars ever made. Those cars were designed to look like they could fly, but our next prototype was designed to look like a wedge that could slip under a closed door, and it had no doors at all. 14. The Lancia Stratozero. In 1970, the world of car design was changed forever when the Italian company Lancia revealed a prototype called the Stratozero. This car was so low, so sharp, and so futuristic that it looked like a prop from a science fiction movie. It was the ultimate expression of the wedge design, and it was less than 33 inches tall. That is lower than the waist of most adults. The Stratozero was a pure exercise in style. The body was a single sharp wedge from front to back. There were no traditional doors. You see, to get into the car, the entire front windshield would hinge open like the cockpit of a fighter jet. You would then have to step over the bodywork and climb down into the 2 seats, which were basically just pads on the floor. The steering column would even move out of the way to make it easier to get in. The engine was hidden in the back under a triangular cover made of slats that would open up for cooling. The taillights were a strip of bulbs that ran across the entire back of the car. The car was a fully working prototype, and the story goes that the head of the company, Nuccio Bertone, drove it under the closed security barrier at the Lancia factory just to show the company's boss how serious he was about the design. The boss was so impressed that it led to the creation of the legendary Lancia Stratos rally car. The Stratozero was impossibly low and flat, but another famous Italian company saw that design and said, "We can go even flatter." 15. The Ferrari 512S Modulo. If the Lancia Stratozero was a wedge, the Ferrari 512S Modulo was a flying saucer. Unveiled in the same year, 1970, this prototype from the design house Pininfarina took the low and flat idea to its absolute extreme. The Modulo was based on the chassis of a powerful Ferrari race car, but the body was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The car was so low it barely looked real. It was only 37 inches tall. The wheels were almost completely hidden inside the smooth, futuristic bodywork. There were no traditional doors on this car either. To get inside, the entire roof and windshield section would slide forward on rails, creating an opening for the driver and passenger to climb in. It was like getting into a spaceship from the Jetsons. One of the most unique features was the engine cover. The back of the car had a flat panel with 24 holes in it, which allowed you to see the powerful V12 engine underneath. The car was originally just a design study, a non-working model, but years later, a famous car collector named James Glickenhaus bought the car from Pininfarina and spent years painstakingly making it a fully drivable car. Now, this once static piece of art can actually be seen driving on the road, a truly unbelievable sight. A car with a sliding canopy roof is pure science fiction. But our next car brought jet-age technology to real American families, and for a short time, the future was powered by a turbine. 16. The Chrysler Turbine Car. For decades, car companies had dreamed of putting a jet engine in a car. But the GM Firebird was too extreme. In the early 1960s, Chrysler actually did it. They built a car that looked relatively normal on the outside but was powered by a gas turbine engine on the inside. And the wildest part is, they gave these cars to regular people to drive in the real world. The Chrysler Turbine Car was a beautiful copper-colored two-door hardtop. It looked stylish, but the real magic was under the hood. A turbine engine works differently than a regular piston engine. It has far fewer moving parts and can run on almost any flammable liquid. Chrysler demonstrated this by running the car on everything from gasoline and diesel to tequila and even Chanel No. 5 perfume. The engine also made a unique sound, a high-pitched whoosh, like a giant vacuum cleaner or a jet plane taxiing. Between 1963 and 1964, Chrysler built 55 of these cars and loaned them out to 203 families across the country as part of a massive public test. People used them to go to the grocery store and take their kids to school. The program was a huge publicity success, but the engines had problems. They had poor fuel economy and slow acceleration from a stop. In the end, Chrysler decided the technology was not ready. In a shocking move, they gathered up almost all the cars and had them destroyed, so the technology would not fall into the hands of their competitors. A car that runs on perfume is bizarre. But what about a car that tries to get rid of half its wheels? Our next prototype is a car that tried to balance on just 2 wheels. 17. The Ford Gyron. In 1961, the Ford Motor Company unveiled a concept car that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It was called the Gyron, and it only had 2 wheels, one at the front and one at the back, like a motorcycle. So how did it stay upright? The secret was a giant gyroscope spinning at high speed in the middle of the car. A gyroscope is a spinning wheel that wants to stay in the same position, and this is what kept the Gyron balanced. The car looked like a futuristic Delta Wing fighter jet. It had a long, pointed nose and a sharp, triangular tail. The 2 passengers sat side by side under a bubble canopy. To get in, the entire canopy would lift up. The steering was not done with a wheel, but with a dial in the center of the cockpit. When the car was stopped, 2 small outrigger wheels, like training wheels on a bicycle, would come down from the sides to keep it from tipping over. The Gyron was a stunning piece of design, a vision of a future where cars would be sleek, 2-wheeled machines that gracefully balanced themselves. The truth is, the prototype that was shown to the public did not actually have a working gyroscope inside. It was too big and complicated to fit. The car on display had the little training wheels down to hold it up, but the idea was so powerful and so futuristic that it captured the imagination of everyone who saw it.